Honorable Senior Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As at the 31st of December 2020, the Consolidated Fund account was in overdraft in an amount of $116.6 billion.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. How does the balance compare with the balance as at August 2nd, 2020?
Honorable Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The end December 2020 overdraft balance of $116.6 billion on the Consolidated Fund account represented a deterioration of $37.9 billion compared to the 2nd August 2020 overdraft of $78.7 billion. In this regard, sir, it should be noted that if one were to take account of all government bank accounts at the central bank, at the time that the People's Progressive Party civic government demitted office in April 2015, government was a net depositor in the central bank with $16 billion in aggregate deposits held at the bank. By end July 2020, sir, towards the end of the APNU-AFC's extended stay in government, government had moved to a net overdraft position of $93 billion. That is to say $93 billion taking into consideration all government bank accounts held at the central bank. In comparison, the balance on all government bank accounts held at the central bank at the end of 2020 would have been an overdraft of $128 billion. It is worthwhile to note, sir, that the question of this overdraft had been flagged by a number of domestic and international agencies and authorities, including the International Monetary Fund, who on more than one occasion drew attention to the fact that this overdraft was being accumulated and that it reflected the fact that government fiscal operations were being conducted without appropriate financing being mobilized. It is worthwhile to note too, sir, that the overdraft inherited as at the 2nd of August 2020, were that to be aggregated with other domestic debts incurred and aggregated with contingent liabilities that were issued, or borrowings that were contracted by other public sector entities and supported by government guarantees, such as the NISIL bond, which I think is the subject of a subsequent question, and government's accumulated indebtedness, such as the $12 billion owed by various government agencies to GPL, just to give one example, that in fact at that time, that is to say at the 2nd of August 2020, when the People's Progressive Party civic assumed office, if all of those debts had been aggregated, the then government would have been in violation of the statutory ceiling on debts. It would be recalled, sir, that it was a direct result of this, that the new government had to come swiftly to the National Assembly to adjust the ceiling. What is even more significant, sir, is that this overdraft that had been accumulated by the 2nd of August was accumulated at a time when the APNU AFC was already overtaxing the people of Guyana and the businesses of Guyana, with tax revenues in 2019 amounting to $226 billion, a 58% increase compared to the 2015 level of $142.9 billion. I make that point, sir, really to emphasize that you would expect that at a time when tax revenues are increasing so dramatically, when the tax burden that is being imposed on the people and on the private sector of Ghana, when that tax burden was being increased so steeply, you would have expected, in fact, the budget to be adequately financed without recourse to these overdrafts. In fact, sir, the tax measures introduced by the APNU AFC are well known. The introduction of VAT on water and electricity, the introduction of VAT, the imposition of VAT on basic food and household items, the imposition of VAT on exports, increases in land fees, etc. While at the same time, critical social programs were being eliminated, such as, for example, the $10,000 school grant, which was eliminated, the termination of community service officers, CSOs, 2,000 of them were terminated, the removal of water and electricity subsidies to pensioners, this was also unconscionably removed, the removal of the 1-month bonus to discipline services, this was also removed, the closure of the sugar, the refusal to provide critical support to the sugar industry was also, one would have expected that all of these initiatives would have resulted in an improved fiscal situation and would have alleviated the need for the incurrence of this overdraft. But alas, sir, that was not to be. And notwithstanding those harsh and punitive measures implemented by the APNU AFC government while in office, they nevertheless, as a result of wasteful spending, they nevertheless, as a result of their extravagant and wasteful spending, caused this massive overdraft to be accumulated. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would not even want to label on some of the responses alluded by the honorable member, since I deem them all irrelevant to the actual question asked. I move on, Mr. Speaker. What has caused the deterioration or improvement in the two balances?
Honorable Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance.
Thank you very much, sir. The change in the balance, as I mentioned earlier, there was a $37.9 billion change in the balance. The change in the balance, sir, is attributed to a number of factors. First of all, there was in fact a stock of checks that were issued by the APNU AFC government that had not yet hit the bank balance. That, in fact, amounted to approximately $5.2 billion. In addition to that, sir, a number of other payments had to be made by government to liquidate liabilities inherited. These included, I alluded earlier to the $12 billion debt that was owing to GPL and which needed to be cleared. I believe it is already a matter of public record, sir, that our government had to move to liquidate that debt, and we paid off very early in our term in office $6 billion worth of that debt. Payments also had to be made in relation to the NISIL bond, which I'm not going to elaborate on now because we're coming back to a second question on that matter. So in addition to that, it would be recalled that when we assumed office, there was no plan in place to respond to COVID-19. No support had been provided to the people of Guyana. No support had been provided to the people of Guyana, and very little preparations had been made to address this matter. As a result of it, sir, the People's Progressive Party civic government had to move swiftly to take action to bring relief to the people of Guyana. That relief, sir, included outfitting the health sector, first of all, to conduct testing. It would be recalled, sir, the limited extent of testing, the shockingly limited extent of testing that was being done by the APNU AFC while during their term in office. It would be recalled, sir, the lack of preparedness of the health sector to cope with COVID-19. Our government, upon assuming office, had rapidly to equip the health sector to respond to COVID-19. It would be recalled, sir, that no relief had been provided to households. We had to implement a program of providing COVID relief to households, which resulted in $7 billion worth of expenditure being implemented. It would also be recalled, sir, that no provisions had been made to support our frontline workers. We introduced a special one-off payment to our frontline workers. It would be recalled, sir, that the 2-week one-off payment that was made to the frontline workers cost in excess of $1.1 billion. In addition, sir, recognizing the challenging circumstances in which our public sector employees as a whole were operating under, it would be recalled, sir, that we also introduced a one-off payment to all public sector employees that benefited more than 60,000 persons at the cost of $2 billion. In addition to this, sir, this honorable House would recall that in the emergency budget that was tabled by my distinguished colleague, the Honorable Minister Juan Edgel, on behalf of our new government, an extensive list of measures aimed at alleviating and removing the burdensome taxes that had been introduced by the burdensome and unconscionable taxes that had been introduced by the APNU AFC government. All of those measures, sir, would have had a fiscal impact which would have contributed to the movement in the balance on the consolidated fund. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as national leaders, whenever we come to the National Assembly, we must be able to come with truth and facts. For the honorable member to say in his response that the APNU AFC government had no plan to deal with COVID, he is telling untruth and false information. And I wish to remind this honorable House that when the People's Progressive Party came to government on the 2nd
Honorable
of
Member,
August,
and the supplemental question is? Honorable Member, and the supplemental question is?
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. But as I said before, as responsible leaders, when we come here, we must come speaking the truth. Today, sir, our nation has had over 400 plus deaths due to COVID, due to inept incompetence of the People's Progressive.
Honorable Member, I guess you don't have a supplemental question, and I won't allow you to make another speech.
I am moving on, Comrade Speaker.
Okay.
What instruments does the government plan to use to retire the overdraft?
Mr. Speaker, our government plans to retire this overdraft using debentures with varying tenors.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable members, I want to bring your attention to a technical issue we are facing in the Assembly with respect to the sound quality. Some of the monitors are overhead, and for some of us, it picks up the feed for those of us who are speaking onto them. So if we're going to want to shout into the microphone, then we wouldn't hear you well. And I will have no choice but to use the device at my fingertip to control the shouting so that we can speak in a manner that people can hear us. We are working to remedy that. Initially, we had placed monitors on the ground that helped, but somehow we're still getting the issue of muffled sound. So, thank you very much. Honorable Member, Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the response given by the honorable member to the previous question did not come over clearly. So perhaps in his response to the final question, which is a follow-up on the last question, he can provide clarity.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
So with respect
so
to...
it wasn't clear, so you want him to repeat?
Pardon?
You said it wasn't clear. You didn't hear it clearly.
Yes.
So you'd like him to repeat?
To repeat in response
Thank you.
to the last question.
Honorable Senior Minister in the Office of the President, we have also refacilitated the two podiums which you could speak from, and you can speak from them without your masks. Honorable Senior Minister.
Very well, sir. I'm happy to repeat the response. I said that the government is planning to retire the overdraft using debentures of varying tenor.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. To the honorable member, with respect to question 4, please provide an approximate time when this will be done.
Honorable Senior Minister, the Office of the President.
Certainly, sir. Mr. Speaker, through you, it would be recalled that we actually came to this House, I believe it was on the 4th of February 2021, seeking approval to the limits on the external and domestic borrowing, increases to the external and domestic borrowing limits. This, it would be recalled, was largely for the purposes of addressing precisely this matter, the accumulated regularizing of the accumulated overdraft. Having sought and obtained approval of the increase in the limits, the relevant limits, we have now, sir, initiated action to extinguish the overdraft by replacing it with the debentures to which I have just referred. And that process is in fact already underway and will be completed before the end of June, before the end of the current month, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Through you, sir, can the Honorable Minister state the amount of the bond secured by NISIL for use by GAISUCO?
Honorable Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance.
Thank you very much, sir. Sir, the full amount of the bond subscribed to by subscribers was an amount of $30 billion. That was the full amount of the bond, the bond issue. However, sir, of that full amount subscribed, only, I shouldn't say only, of the $30 billion, $17.5 billion, 17.479 to be more precise, $17.5 billion were drawn down by NISIL so far, net of trustee fees of $121 million. It should be stated, sir, once again, But this bond has a tenor of 5 years and a fixed interest rate of 4.75%. And the bond is backed by a sovereign guarantee issued by the government of Guyana, which effectively makes the instrument risk-free lending, which effectively makes the instrument comparable to government borrowing. I say this, sir, because it is relevant to note that this bond was not raised through a competitive process, as far as can be ascertained, and committed the government to paying an interest rate of 4.75%, while at a time when treasury bills would only have cost 1% or thereabouts. Sir, the cost savings that would have resulted had the government at the time raised the relevant financing at 1% instead of the 4.75%, the cost savings that would have been incurred would have been in the vicinity, sir, of $2.1 billion. In addition, sir, I might add that the bond includes a clause that prevents or penalizes early repayment of the instrument, which effectively means that we're stuck with this 4.75% interest rate that was committed to by the APNU AFC while in government. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Through you, Mr. Speaker, with respect to the question asked earlier, can the Honorable Minister state the amount secured and how much has been disbursed by the bondholders to NISIL?
Honorable Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I was somewhat puzzled because the questions, the various parts of the questions included some element of repetition. So the part that says, can the Honorable Minister state the amount secured, is indistinguishable from the question that was asked at part one. That notwithstanding, sir, I will I'll beg your forgiveness in committing some measure of repetition myself. And I will say that as I indicated when I answered part one, the full potential value of the bond is $30 billion, only, I use only again, not only, but amounts totaling $14.78 billion, sorry, my apologies, sir. Amounts totaling $17.5 billion have been drawn down by NISIL. So I believe net of trustee fees of $121 million. So I hope that that answers the question. The full amount of the bond secured was $30 billion, of which 17.5 was drawn down. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. With respect to two, can the Honorable Minister state the amount disbursed by the bondholders to NISIL and how much has been disbursed to Gaisuku as at August 2nd, 2020 and December 31st, 2020?
Honorable Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, rather, so as to ensure that I'm not misreading the question and I don't answer the wrong thing, I'm struggling again with this repetition. So I'm seeing here, the question asks again, can the Honorable Minister state the amount disbursed by the bondholders to NISIL? And that looks exactly like question 2. Might I ask, sir, before I proceed to answer the question, might I ask, sir, through you, to the Honourable Member, the distinction between parts 2 and parts 2 and 3 of the question?
Honorable Minister, if I heard her correctly, she was asking how much was disbursed from NISIL to Gaisuku. That's the part.
But, sorry, there are 2 parts to it, right? So it says, there are 2 parts with respect, sir. Can the Honourable Minister state the amount disbursed by the bondholders to NISIL? That's the first part. And I'm trying to understand how that is different from the question that was already asked at part 2. Then there's a second part to part 3. How much has been disbursed to Gaisuku, which has not yet been answered.
Right.
So the second part I'm perfectly happy to answer, but might I, sir, with the greatest of respect to you, seek clarification from the honourable member, how does the first part of the question differ from the question that was asked at part 2 of the question?
Honorable Minister, I will suggest you proceed to answering the second part of part 3.
Very, Sir, I made it crystal clear. I made it crystal clear that I have no difficulty answering the second part of the question.
Honorable Minister, just for us to be pellucid, my understanding was the repetition of 17.5 billion was repeated twice. But I'll ask the honorable member asking the question to repeat so that the minister can be quite pellucid in his understanding.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. With respect to question 2 that is, can the Honorable Minister state the amount disbursed by the bondholders to NISIL and how much of the monies were actually disbursed to Gaisuku as at 2nd of August 2020 and December 31st, 2020?
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Minister, Senior Minister in the Office of the President.
Certainly, sir. So, in relation to this two-part question, in relation to the amount disbursed by the bondholders to NISIL, as I indicated when I answered question 2, a total of 17.478 billion or 17.5 billion, net of trustee fees of 121 million, has been disbursed to by the bondholders to NISIL for the second time. Out of that amount, sir, as at 2nd August 2020, amounts totaling 10.27 had been disbursed to Gaisuku. As at 31st December 2020, amounts totaling 11.47 billion had been disbursed to Gaisuku.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Through you, sir, to the Honorable Member. With respect to 3, can the Honorable Minister state how the money was expended by Gaisuku between current and capital expenditures?
Honorable Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance. Certainly, sir. As at 2nd August 2020, of the $10.27 billion that had been expended by Gaisuku, 1.293 billion had related to capital expenditure and 8.978 to current expenditure. That was as at 2nd August 2020. As at 31st of August 2020, of the 11.471 billion expended by Gaisuku, 1.293 related to capital expenditure and 10.178 to current expenditure.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Through you, sir, can the Honorable Member state how much of the bond has been repaid by NISIL?
Honorable Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance.
Certainly, sir. The total amount paid by NISIL to bondholders to date is $1.152 billion. It might be worthwhile to note, sir, that when we came into office, we discovered the rather astonishing situation that NISIL was actually servicing the bond out of the proceeds of the bond, which basically meant that they borrowed for the purposes of repaying the borrowing. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Through you, sir, can the honorable member state whether government, as guarantor, has had to meet any of the repayments made to date?
Honorable Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance.
Yes, sir. As I indicated earlier, sir, this bond was supported by an unconditional government guarantee, necessitating government to step into the shoes of the borrower if needed. That circumstance did arise, sir, and to date, bond payments made by government under this bond arrangement amount to $4.019 billion, comprising principal of $3.41 billion, interest of $606 million, and the payment of agency fees amounting to agency and trustee fees amounting to $1.57 million each.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Through you again, can the honorable minister state whether the government will continue to retain the balance of the bond for the use by GAISUPO?
Honorable Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The answer to that question, sir, is yes, for at least two very different reasons. First of all, as I indicated earlier, this bond was concluded at an exorbitant interest rate of 4.75, considering that it was backed by a government guarantee. And it locked in that interest rate with a penalty clause for early repayment. But secondly, sir, given the state in which the sugar industry was inherited after 5 years of complete neglect and abandon by the APNU AFC, our government has expressed very clearly our commitment to revitalize and restructure the industry to support the achievement of a diversified and modern sugar industry, one that is sustainable and economically viable. Sir, we have already started to take steps to recapitalize the industry. It would be recalled that in the 2020 and the 2021 budgets, appropriations were sought to ensure that the industry is recapitalized and restructured and brought back to some measure of viability and ultimately competitiveness. Against this background, sir, it is opposite to note that I had the privilege of representing His Excellency the President only last week at an event hosted by the United Nations International Labour Organization, at which the ILO launched a report documenting the results of a socio-economic study that entity conducted, a study of the socio-economic impact of the closure of sugar estates. That report, sir, is publicly available. And it paints, sir, an extremely distressing picture of the manner in which the APNU AFC government proceeded to close the estates without absolutely any consideration without absolutely any consideration of the impact that these closures were going to, the decimating impact that these closures were going to have, not only on sugar workers directly and their families, but indeed, sir, on entire communities and the entire rural agricultural economy, which were so closely intertwined with the sugar industry. And like I said, sir, that report is publicly available. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I can say that the report thus far is a biased report. And I want to remind the honorable member that the APNUF.
Honorable Minister, this is a time for asking questions. There are 5 minutes remaining. I'll give you back a minute. Please ask the question.
Okay, sir, I will do a supplementary question to the question posed earlier. Is the Honorable Minister aware that the APNU AFC government would have injected 60 billion into Gaisupo?
Honorable Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. What I am aware of, sir, is that the APNU AFC purported to constitute a commission of inquiry into the sugar industry. That commission went on to do its work and stopped short of recommending the closure of any industry. And despite the fact that their own commission of inquiry, stopped short of recommending the closure of any estates, the APNU AFC government nevertheless proceeded with the closure of the estate, with the closure of estates, with absolutely no regard whatsoever, for what that decision was going to mean for tens of thousands of Guyanese people living in those communities. Thank you very much.
Honorable Member, Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, another supplementary question. Is the Honorable Member aware in October 2020, these were the words uttered by the then President of the Cooperative Republic. If Skeldon factory doesn't work, sugar is dead.
Honorable Senior Minister in the Office of the President.
What I am aware of, sir, is that the APNU AFC government made absolutely no attempt to try to get Skeldon to work, or indeed any other estate.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this is my last supplementary on this particular question. Is the Honorable Minister aware that the APNU AFC government, when those estates were closed, the government took full control of the health centers, the drains, we paid full severance to the workers?
Honorable Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance.
Mr. Speaker, what I am aware of is that when the workers were severed, instead of readily paying their severance, the workers had to literally beg and fight for their severance and ultimately go to the courts with the support of GAU to get their severance. That's what I'm aware of.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Ferguson, please proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know for a fact that the response given by the Honorable Member is not accurately. I'll move on now, Mr. Speaker. With respect to the question 5 above, if the answer is yes, please provide a schedule of disbursement of the balance.
Honorable Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. The balance remaining, sir, will be disbursed as needed in accordance with an action plan that is being prepared by the Board of Directors, by the management and the Board of Directors, under supervision of the Ministry of Agriculture, sir.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Ferguson. Honorable Member, before you ask the question, our time, the 40 minutes is up. But remember, I promise you an extra minute. Please, go ahead.
With respect to 5, if the answer is no, when will the balance of the bond be returned to the bondholders?
Honorable Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, sir. Permit me, sir. Sir, there was a part 7 of the question. The part 7 of the question said, can the minister state whether Gaisuco will retain the balance of the bond for use by Gaisuco? Yes or no? And I answered that question, and I said yes. Part 8 says, if the answer is yes, and we've all, I believe the whole world, heard, not just me, not just the 65 members of this House, the whole world heard that the answer was yes, as a result of which, part 8 of the question then says, with respect to part 7, if the answer is yes, which the entire world just heard me say, please provide, etc., etc., and I have answered that. I am struggling to comprehend, sir, by what stream of logic. I am struggling to comprehend, sir, by what stream of logic the honorable member then reads, I wouldn't use the word parrots, but reads part 9, reads religiously the script that has been put in her hand, and which apparently she's not apparently terribly acquainted with. She then religiously reads part 9 of the question that says, with respect to part 7, if the answer was no, etc., etc., sir. I place myself, sir, at your gracious mercy. I place myself, sir, at your gracious mercy. And I ask, sir, what is expected of me in these circumstances?
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister, I will tell you what I have to do is, that is the end of the question period. I want to draw the Assembly's attention to Standing Order 22.8. And it says basically if there are questions remaining, not answered orally during this period, then those questions will revert to the Minister to be answered in writing. Thank you very much.
Statements by ministers, including policy statements. Personal explanations. Request for leave to move the adjournment of the National Assembly on definite matters of urgent public importance. Motions relating to the business or sittings of the National Assembly and moved by minister. Introduction of bills. Public business. Government's business.
Honorable members, the Assembly will now resolve itself into Committee of Supply to consider Financial Paper Number 1 of 2020. Honorable Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance.
Mr. Chairman, we're in committee, right? Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, in accordance with Article 171(2) of the Constitution, I signify that the Cabinet has recommended for consideration by the Assembly the motion for the approval of the proposals set out in Financial Paper Number 1 of 2021, supplementary estimates current and capital totaling $1,906,775,000 for the period from 1st April 2021 to 8th June 2021, and I now move the motion, sir.
The motion is proposed. We will now consider the paper as usual. The item will be taken both from current and capital estimates in the order for which the minister is responsible. And I propose a question.
Sir, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Member, Mr. Ferguson.
Figueroa.
Mr. Figueroa, sorry.
Code 47 to 473. Could the
Honorable Member, Mr. Figueroa, I was about to propose. I have to propose and then you can stand when I propose, right? So, I now propose that item 1, Agency Code 47-473, account 6221, forms part of these estimates. The Honorable Member, Mr. Figueroa. Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Chairman, is this the office of the Prime Minister to respond to these questions, Mr. Chairman? All right, let me leave that.
Honorable Member, Dr. Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, Agency 47 to 473, Ministry of Health, Family and Primary Healthcare Services, 6221. Description, drug and medical supplies. Mr. Speaker, the revised budget in 2020 was $571,640,000. So that's the end of 2020. So this 2021, there was a budget of $1,101,268,000 voted for this item. And there, so that I don't know how much was spent out of that, but here the minister is coming for another more or less 1.3 billion for drug and medical supplies. And the remarks here would have been to facilitate payment of vaccine supplies and vaccine rollout activities to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. So, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, Honorable Minister, could you tell us what vaccines we're talking about? What type of vaccines? I know recently you had Sputnik coming. Is it more Sputnik? Or what type of vaccines? The quantity of vaccines? How much AstraZeneca? How much Sputnik? How much, Sinopharm? And to the regions.
Because anybody looking at a plan from outside will say, well, I don't know where they're going, how many we have, and what's the epidemiological state of affairs. So that's the first question: the types of vaccine, the quantity of vaccine, and the regions where they're expected, and preferably if you can give us how many first dose, how many second dose.
Honorable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And thank you very much, Honorable Member, Dr. Cummins, for the question. The vaccines that we are using currently in Guyana, there are three types. AstraZeneca vaccine, which we got through COVAX, and we have now bought Sputnik V, and we have also bought Sinopharm. Initially, we got a donation of Sinopharm vaccines from the Chinese government, and that was 20,000. And now we are buying 100,000 doses. So that's the type of vaccines. In terms of regional distribution of vaccines, what I can give the member is that we have looked at the adult population for each region, and we have vaccines allocated to each of those regions. Now, to date, as of the 13th of June, in Region 1, we would have completed 9,684 persons. In Region 2, we would have completed vaccinating 12,817 persons. In Region 3, we would have completed vaccinating 31,495 persons. In Region 4, we would have completed vaccinating 95,802 persons. In Region 5, we would have completed vaccinating, this is first dose for all of them, 15,767 persons. In Region 6, we have completed vaccinating 37,842 persons. In Region 7, we have completed vaccinating 5,279 persons. In Region 8, we have completed the vaccination of 2,061 persons. And in Region 9, we have 6,712 persons who received their vaccination. And Region 10, we are at 3,538 persons first dose.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Dr. Cummings.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you've said how many you've vaccinated. Now, for instance, Region 1, you said 9,000 plus. But what's the figure we are looking at to be totally vaccinated? So if everybody were to decide, okay, I'm going to come, there's some incentive, I'm going to come and vaccinate, do you have enough vaccines for that had they come? So that's what I'm saying. You told me 9,000 would have been vaccinated. But how many was it total that, had they come, should have been vaccinated?
Honorable Minister of Health.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Again, and thank you, Honorable Member, for the question. So, in Region 1, we are targeting 18,016 persons. And to date, with the numbers that I just gave, we would have completed 53.8% of that population, which means that we have 8,332 persons remaining in Region 1. In Region 2, we are targeting 30,505 persons. Out of those, as I said, we have already vaccinated 12,817. So we have 17,688 persons more to vaccinate in Region 2. In Region 3, we are looking at 70,245 persons. To date, we have vaccinated 31,495. We have 38,750 more persons to vaccinate. And I can go on and read out for all 10 regions.
Could you lay it over? Could you lay over that information?
Honorable Member Dr. Cummings, please. If you want to have a conversation with the minister, we can allow you guys to go.
Yes, all right, well, let him continue. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. So if you want the minister to label, you can ask me to ask him. Thank you.
So,
thank you, Honorable Minister. The Honorable Member says if you want, you can lay that over.
Or
Mr. Speaker, could you continue? You started.
Honorable Minister, please continue.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Region 4, we are targeting 203,046 persons. To date, we have completed vaccinating 95,802, and we have 107,244 remaining. Region 5, we are looking at a population of 32,474. We have completed vaccinating 15,767, and we have 16,707 remaining. Region 6, we're targeting 71,459 persons. To date, we have vaccinated 37,842, and we have remaining 33,617. Region 7, we're targeting 11,976. We have already given first dose 5,279, and we have 6,697 remaining. Region 8, we're looking at a population of 7,220 persons. To date, we have given out 2,061 vaccines, and we have remaining 5,158. Region 9, we are at 15,798 persons we are targeting. To date, we have given 6,712, and remaining would be 9,086. And Region 10, we're targeting 26,063 persons. To date, we have given 3,538 vaccines. We have 22,525 persons more in Region 10 to give vaccines. And just to say, Mr. Speaker, that we have procured vaccines for all adult persons in Guyana.
Thank you, Minister. Honorable Minister, Honorable Member, Dr. Cummings.
Mr. Chair, the Minister would have spoken about COVAX. We partner with COVAX, WHO and so forth, and they're committed to providing about 30% of the vaccine doses, I think, throughout different regions. So am I to believe that out of what you have spent, the money expended here, that you were assisted by COVAX with 30% of the costs of the vaccines? Am I correct?
Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, Honorable Member. This line item does not take into consideration the donation that we receive from COVAX. COVAX has committed to deliver to countries, and we are one of those countries. We are called an AMC 90 country, and they have committed to give us vaccines to 20% of our population. What we are seeking here in this allocation is to purchase vaccines, and these are Sputnik V vaccines and for Sinopharm vaccines. So that's what we are seeking here. So the sum of money that is allocated here is for 200,000 doses of Sputnik V vaccines and 100,000 doses of Sinopharm vaccines.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member Dr. Cummings.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The remark says here, the money also is for vaccine rollout activities to mitigate the spread of COVID-19. The cold chain, as you know, the focus is on cold chain and cold chain logistics. And the cold chain, we may have a good cold chain situation or infrastructure, I should say, in the urban area and in Georgetown. With there being this uptick in cases worldwide, I mean, throughout not only in Georgetown, the coast, but also in the hinterland, what transformative change to take into consideration the last mile distribution as it relates to cold chain have in place?
Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you again, Honorable Member. The cold chain that we have for vaccination was built for vaccines between 2 to 8 degrees Celsius. The vaccines that are necessary for COVID-19 ranges from -70 to 2 to 8. And therefore, a significant component of that chain, which is the ultra cold to the -20, was not available in Guyana. We have since built that. So we have enough storage for vaccines that require -20, and we have storage for vaccines that require -70 or -80. We have been able, with the allocation given by this National Assembly, to be able to build several hubs for vaccines. So at the Kingston Bond, we have a hub which has been augmented with -20. So we have a walk-in freezer at Kingston with -20 capability. We also have 10 freezers at Kingston with -70 or -80 capabilities. We also have at the Diamond, at MMU Diamond, we have a container there that is capable of storing at -20. We also have a similar arrangement in Region 6, and we have repurposed one of the freezers in Region 10 to have similar capacity. We have also, over the last several months, built more than 15 locations that can serve as regional hubs, and we have equipped them to ensure that they have capabilities to take in vaccines. We have also, in addition to that, we have been running regular flights to all the different destinations using dry ice, because some of the vaccines that we are using to transport them require that they be transported at -20. And to be able to have that type of temperature, we have bought the right containers to move those vaccines around, and also to make sure that we have a constant supply of dry ice when we are moving those vaccines around. And so one can appreciate if you're moving vaccines, say from Latam to go to Aishalton, and if you're going to vaccinate someone in Aishalton with Sputnik V, that we have to use containers that would be equipped with dry ice to move the vaccines there, and then we thaw it out to give those vaccines. And we have been doing that right across the hinterland. So the logistics of moving vaccines, moving dry ice, supplementing the dry ice, that is done on a daily basis with a number of partners, which include the Guyana Defense Force, who has been helping us to get dry ice to a lot of these locations. In some cases, we have been using some of the private aircrafts to get dry ice to those locations. And the manufacturers of dry ice locally is Banks DIH and DDL, so every day we are purchasing dry ice from them to make sure that we have adequate supplies to take out these vaccines, keep them at the right temperature until we are able to give it to someone. So yes, we have adequate cold chain from the top right down to the regional level, and we use these containers to take out vaccines to any one of the villages that you can think. You would recall that we had a case when a team went into guns, and because of that, they had to spend a longer time than was anticipated, more than 3 days, and because of the conditions of the landing strip, no plane could have gone in to pick them up, and because of that, we had some spoilage of vaccines there because we couldn't maintain the cold chain. So we had to discard those vaccines. So these are the practical challenges that we face when we are rolling out this immunization program. Nevertheless, we have been able to make a lot of progress, I would say, with more than 44.3% or so nationally being vaccinated with first dose vaccines.
Thank you, Honorable
Mr.
Minister.
Chair.
Honorable Member Dr. Cummings.
Yes, I don't have any further question except to say I would like to have the list of the regional hubs where they are located. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. I know
Mr.
the Honorable
Speaker.
Leader of the Opposition.
Yes, sir. Honorable Minister, we understand that this is money that has already been spent. What I would like to find out from you is what vaccines did we purchase, how many did we purchase, and from whom were these purchases made? It wasn't answered. I asked the question, how many vaccines by type were purchased, what price did we pay for them, and from whom did we purchase these vaccines? That's the question.
Thank you, Honorable Leader of the Opposition. Honorable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much, Honorable Harman, for the question. As I said before, with this contingency, we have been able to purchase 200,000 doses of Sputnik V vaccines. And we have also purchased 100,000 doses of the Sinopharm vaccines. With the Sputnik V vaccine, we have been supplied through the United Arab Emirates and through the offices of Mr. Ahmed Dalmood Al Maktoum, and he has, through his offices, have been supplying us with the Sputnik vaccines. With the Sinopharm vaccines, the manufacturer of the vaccine has been supplying us with those vaccines. So I think that would answer your questions.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Minister, could you say what was the procurement method used to acquire these vaccines? You gave us a name there just now, but could you indicate to us what was the procurement method that we used to purchase these vaccines?
Honorable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The method of procurement was direct sourcing, and that is because there is, I think everyone in this room should be aware of that, there is vaccine scarcity. And just to make it pellucidly clear, we have had discussions with Pfizer to try to acquire vaccines for Guyana. Unfortunately, as I've said before, Pfizer told us that they would not be able to give us vaccines until 2022. We have also had discussions with Moderna to try to source vaccines for Guyana. Similarly, we got a similar answer, and therefore we would not be able to get Moderna until 2022. We have also been engaged with Johnson & Johnson to be able to acquire vaccines from Johnson & Johnson. And again, we haven't been able to conclude directly with Johnson & Johnson, but we are getting Johnson & Johnson vaccines through a supplier. We have, in terms of the other vaccines now, Sputnik, we have been engaged directly with the Russian Sovereign Fund. Unfortunately, they have not been able to give us vaccines directly, but they have sent us to suppliers. And this is one of the suppliers that have been licensed by the Russian Direct Sovereign Fund to supply countries with vaccines. And therefore, if we wanted to have these vaccines, we have to go to the supplier. And that is what we did. We got vaccines from the supplier. In the case of Sinopharm, we have had discussions directly with Sinopharm. And out of those discussions, we have been able to acquire this 100,000 doses. In the next paper that we'll be looking at, I would be able to talk about how we are sourcing the Johnson & Johnson vaccines, because CARICOM has brokered an initiative with the African Union. And out of that initiative, the African Union has allocated to the Caribbean 1,500,000 doses, of which Guyana has been allocated about 148,000 doses. Most of that is going to be the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. At least that is what we are told for now. So these things are still work in progress, and as vaccines become available, we are trying to acquire them. So this is where we are. Without acquiring these vaccines, we would not have been able to vaccinate our population at the level of 44.3%. Because of these vaccines, we have been able to do that. And all we have to do is look around in the Caribbean. Look around in the Caribbean and you would see, in many of the countries in the Caribbean, they have not been able to acquire vaccines. They have been depending solely on COVAX. And because they have been depending on COVAX, COVAX has not been able to supply them with the vaccines, although there were many promises. And if we had gone that route, today we would not have been able to vaccinate more than 10% of our population. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Leader of the Opposition, would you like to ask a supplemental question?
Mr. Chairman, could I ask the Honorable Minister, what was the actual price that we paid for the Sputnik vaccines, and what did we pay for the Sinopharm vaccines?
Thank you, Honorable Leader of the Opposition. Honorable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. For the 200,000 doses of the Sputnik vaccines, we paid $957 million. And for the 100,000 doses of the Sinopharm vaccines, we paid $326 million, approximately.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Mr. Ramjitan, I saw you getting up.
Yes. This sum of money, did it go towards any pharmaceuticals that are outside of vaccines for purposes of treatment?
Honorable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much for that question. No, this is solely for vaccines. And we have used the budget allocation that we've had from the National Assembly to be able to procure things like remdesivir and so forth. So that's not included here. This is solely for vaccines.
Thank you, Honorable Minister of Health. Honorable members.
Sir.
Honorable Member, Mr. Figuera, and then I see the Honorable Member, Ms. Sorabo Hali.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Honorable Minister, can you inform the House what was the unit cost for each cycle procured under this sum, and how many cycles were procured?
What cycle?
First batch, second batch. And if I may, while I'm on the floor, sir, you have indicated that each region has a particular target for the adult population. What is it that informed that adult population, each respective region? What was used by the ministry?
Honorable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I would leave the honorable member to do the unit costs because I have just in my answer to the honorable leader of the opposition, I give him the sum and I give him, which is the denominator, the denominator. So I think the honorable member would be able to calculate the cost. In terms of the, there was something else. Oh, how did we arrive at the numbers? We were able to use the numbers that are provided by the Statistical Bureau, and we look at the adult population, persons 18 years and above, because these vaccines that are currently available are only for persons 18 years and above. So we look at each age cohort and we calculated it, and then we did it by the regions to see how many persons approximately by region. That's why we have these numbers here. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Halley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I am correct, Mr. Chair, the budget speech was read on February 12, 2021. So can the Honorable Minister state whether he was aware of the COVID-19 pandemic on February 12, 2021?
Honorable Minister of Health.
Mr. Chairman, you know, I think I have to constrain myself, so I'll take a couple deep breaths. Because, you know, we have persons who have mismanaged this pandemic, from our patient zero that we had on the 11th of March 2020, when we had that first patient. And we have seen how over that period, this whole pandemic was mismanaged. We didn't have testing capability. We didn't have medicines to treat people. We didn't have the ventilators. And in fact, the hospital that was being prepared was totally unprepared with no equipment. And today we are getting questions here about whether and who is aware of the pandemic. If the honorable member does not know when this pandemic started in the world, perhaps we can give her a lesson in history. But I'm not here for that. I'm here to answer on this line item for this contingency fund.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Halley.
Mr. Chair, I'm guessing from that response that the Honorable Minister was aware of the pandemic on February 12th. Can the Honorable Minister state whether he was aware that vaccines were produced and available to be purchased on February 12, 2021?
Honorable Minister of Health.
Mr. Chairman, again, perhaps the member should, I should ask the member for a clarification. And that is, can the member explain to me, first of all, before I can answer a question, what vaccines she's talking about? COVID vaccine is a big entity, so can the member please be more specific which vaccines she's talking about? And after the member can explain that to me, maybe then I'll proffer an answer.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Halley.
Mr. Chair, there are, let me first, I'm asking the Honorable Minister of Health whether or not he was aware that vaccines, COVID-19 vaccines, whether it be Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, Sputnik, Sinopharm, or any others, because there are many more than those that we're mentioning, were produced and available to be purchased on February 12, 2021.
Honorable Minister of Health.
So again, Mr. Chairman, we know that Sputnik vaccines were available, and it was given emergency use authorization sometime in September of 2020. It was not widely available. At the time, less than 10 countries in the world would have approved the use of Sputnik V. Sinopharm vaccines in 2020 did not complete the third stage.
Go ahead, Honorable Minister.
Sinopharm vaccines did not complete its third phase clinical trials. That only was completed about 3 or 4 months ago, and then the WHO approved that particular vaccine. We have also seen emergency use authorization being given to the AstraZeneca vaccine, which was sometime in late December. Those vaccines were not available for purchase because the majority of them were only available through the COVAX mechanism. And for those countries that would have tied up some bilateral deals directly with some of the manufacturers. We were able then to be able to acquire AstraZeneca vaccine through a bilateral arrangement with the government of India, who kindly donated to us 80,000 doses. We also were able to acquire AstraZeneca vaccine through COVAX, for which we have been negotiating with them since 2020. And we were part of that negotiation, and that's why we have been able to get those vaccines free of cost. And we continue to pursue those negotiations with COVAX. We have also looked at, as I said before, both Pfizer and Moderna, and those suppliers have said to us very clearly that they don't have vaccines to be able to sell to us because they had orders that exceed what they were manufacturing. And therefore, we were unable to get those types of vaccines. Johnson & Johnson, which was recently approved, we have been making attempts to get Johnson & Johnson. And as I just explained, we have done so using the mechanism that CARICOM has initiated, and we hopefully would be getting them out of the African Union.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member Ms. Ali.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister of Health, for clarifying that for us. I don't think it was that difficult. Can the Honorable Minister state whether it was his intention on February 12, 2021, to request or to make available to the public vaccines for use in Guyana?
Honorable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, we know that vaccines are the safest way out of this pandemic. And from very early, when we start looking at the development of vaccines, from the time they became available, the government of Guyana started working on multiple mechanisms to acquire vaccines. And as they became available, we start issuing through our FDA the emergency use authorization for these vaccines. And we have been working since then to make sure that we can have adequate vaccines come to Guyana. So far, we have been able to procure vaccines for every single adult person in Guyana. And we are working to make sure that once vaccines are available for persons under 18, that we will put those mechanisms in place to acquire those vaccines as well. So we have been working on this, and I'm very happy that we have been able to acquire vaccines for our adult population. What we need to do now, Mr. Chairman, is that every single member in this House should assist us to make sure that every single adult Guyanese take their vaccine. That is what is important. Because vaccines are available. What we need now is people to take the vaccines. And if we can get that support where we go to every area and make sure that people encourage them to take their vaccines, then we will be able to exit this pandemic very quickly. But if we continue to be hesitant, and if we continue to send these ambivalent messages pertaining to vaccine, then it is going to cause more vaccine hesitancy. And I want to appeal again to all the members to make sure that we have a united stand and voice in encouraging people to take vaccines. Once we do that, Guyana would be much safer.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Honorable Members Halley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, it is all well and lovely for the minister to stand up and ask us to be involved when they refuse to allow us to be on the task force. And maybe you could answer that question, why it is that they have not asked or requested that the opposition go on the task force, so that we'll be better informed to actually speak with our people on the matter and not have to come to the National Assembly to ask.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I can say that, as far as I'm aware, that you have Mr. Siram, I think is it, who is the chairman for Region 4, who is on the National Task Force. And if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Siram is a senior member of the APNU. And there are other such persons on the task force. So all the information that APNU would need is being given to persons like Mr. Siram, who is on the National Task Force. There's nothing to hide. There's nothing to hide. It's all there.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member.
Yes, sir.
Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Yes, sir. Speaker, this has to do with, to the price of this vaccine that we're paying. Mr. Speaker, when I calculated it, it works out, Honorable Minister, for the Sinovac at $16 US per shot. The Sputnik, about $24 US per shot. The report I read from the WHO, it's called sizing up the shots, lists these vaccines, that is to say the Sputnik at $10 per shot and the Sinovac at $5 per shot. Would you say whether in fact this is a reasonable price we have paid of $24 for the Sputnik and $16 for the Sinovac in the circumstance? Thank you.
Honorable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm very happy that the Leader of the Opposition has asked that question. Very happy. Because if the Leader of the Opposition can today get Sputnik V for $10 and the Sinovac for $5, then the government of Guyana would certainly want to buy from the source that the Leader of the Opposition would be able to get. So the thing here is availability. If it's not available, then we have to buy at the price that we're getting it at. And if my calculations are correct, it is about $22 and not $24. And when we also look at the Sinopharm vaccine, and this includes the doses plus the transportation, and it goes for the same thing for the Sinopharm vaccines. Doses plus the transportation. But if you can get at a better price, we'll be willing to look at it. Because again, as I said, we are all in this together, and if we can negotiate better prices, we'll be happy to work with you.
Minister,
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
It was never my intention
Honorable Leader of the Opposition,
to indicate to you that there is a cheaper source. What I'm saying, this is the World Health Organization saying that these are the prices, and we are paying almost double what it has said. What you have now indicated also is that apart from the vaccine itself, you're factoring in here the cost of transportation from wherever you purchase it to here. So we need to know all of these things, Honorable Minister. It's important for all of us to know. So I am not saying that I have vaccines to sell, but what I'm saying as a Guyanese, we are here interrogating sums of money that have already been spent. And so we need to know how this money was spent. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Leader of the Opposition. Honorable Minister of Health.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think there's anything to respond to. I think it's a comment.
Thank you very much. Honorable Member, Mr. Mahi Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, if I may follow up on a question Honorable Member Tabitha Sarabu Hali asked, reference participation. And the Honorable Minister answered by saying that Daniel Siram, Regional Chairman of Region 4, is on the National Task Force. I want to know if all chairpersons of the 10 regions are on the National Task Force, and if they are representing their respective regions. That's one. And two, if the Honorable Minister is aware that the Honorable Dr. Karen Cummins on numerous occasions wrote requesting to be a part so that the coalition can have information and understand what is happening with COVID and the country so that we can participate fully in making representation with reference to people taking the vaccines. That's two. And my third question, sir, is, of the 3 vaccines that are in Guyana, the AstraZeneca, Sputnik V, and Sinopharm, are all 3 of these vaccines WHO approved?
Honorable Minister of Health.
Again, Mr. Chairman, I think the composition of the task force I would leave to the Honorable Prime Minister, because he is the chair of the task force. Nevertheless, the task force is a very broad-based body comprising of a number of organizations, and people can come there, make representation, learn what we're doing, and so forth. So I don't see a problem there. Now, what I find very disturbing is that somehow a nexus is being created that we cannot go out and talk to people about getting them vaccinated unless somehow we are on the task force. You don't have to be a member of the task force to go and tell people to get vaccination. You don't have to do that. And therefore, the appeal that we have been making is to make sure that every single member of this House speak with one voice and encourage people to get their vaccines.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member.
The last question was about whether or not all the vaccines that we are using is WHO approved. None of the vaccines, all of them, they have what is called emergency use listing by the WHO. AstraZeneca has been given WHO use listing, and they have also been approved in several countries around the world. Sinopharm vaccine, about a month ago, has received emergency use listing by the WHO, and the Sputnik V vaccine is also on the list to go through that process of being finally certified. They have not yet received the emergency use listing, but it is in the process of getting that. Now, while that is so, when we look at the vaccines and the technical things pertaining to the vaccines, Sputnik V, the results of the phase 3 trial, has been published in a very prestigious global journal called The Lancet. And in that journal, it talks about the efficacy of the vaccine, the safety of the vaccine, and based on that, it is at some point going to be approved by the WHO. And I myself has been a member of the executive of the WHO. I only recently came off of that board, and I've been privy to be in several of the meetings dealing with the technical meetings dealing with vaccinations. And I know that this one is up, and it's going to be up soon for approval and for emergency use listing. So we have been using it based on its technical merits, and in fact, there are many, many countries right now who is working to get Sputnik V because all the clinical data is showing that it is an extremely good vaccine to have. And that's why we are using it.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Halley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I asked a number of questions that sounded not sensible at the time, but let me bring it all together. The Honorable Minister stated that, well, he didn't state, but with his facetious response, I'm guessing he's saying that he was aware that we had COVID pandemic on February 12th, when the budget was read. He also responded in the affirmative that he knew vaccines were available. He also responded in the affirmative that, you know, there was intention for the government to bring vaccines to Guyana. Mr. Speaker, as far as I'm aware, we're dealing with contingency advances granted. And the FMAA Contingency Fund 413 says, the minister, when satisfied that an urgent, unavoidable, and unforeseen need for expenditure has arisen. Given the fact that the minister responded in the affirmative to all of these things, the question then begs why it is that this money was not first in the budget 2021 and why it is that we now coming for a contingency fund for this year.
Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Apparently, the honorable member does not understand that section that deals with contingency. We just heard, and we're trying to make a case that perhaps we shouldn't buy these vaccines. How could you put it in the budget if we didn't know the price that we were going to pay for it? How could we put it in the budget if we don't know the source where we're going to get it from? So, the honorable members, you know, we want to make much out of nothing. We know that vaccines are good. We know that they're saving lives. We know that they've saved lives. And here it is that we have members here coming now to try to tell us that we shouldn't be buying the vaccines. Is that what they're saying? Is that what they're really implying?
Stop that, Frank. Stop it. Stop it right now.
Well, we have bought these vaccines. We have bought these vaccines, and we have started.
Honorable Member, Ms. Halley, you have an issue. I see you're standing. But you have to, if you stand, you're going to have to stand on a point of order, not to stand up and wait to ask the next question, please. Honorable Minister, you're still on the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, we know these vaccines save lives, and we are going to use them to save people's lives. And as I keep saying, and I keep appealing to the members on the other side, is to talk to people and let us get as much people vaccinated as fast as possible. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Halley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if we're in the same room, but no one here on the opposition side is saying that vaccine should not be bought. No one here is saying that. That is not the premise of the question being asked. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, that we're dealing with budget. We're dealing with the money's taxpayers' dollars, and they must be accountable for them. Mismanagement will not be tolerated in this House. And so if the minister is aware that we have COVID-19, if the minister had intentions of getting vaccines, on February 12th, I was aware of the cost of the vaccines for those. So that means he should have been aware of that. That means it could have been budgeted in the 2021 budget. Not come and say that it's unforeseen. It's not unforeseen because we know.
So honorable member, the question is
okay. The question then to the honorable minister is whether or not on February 12th they had intentions of buying the vaccine, then why it is that they did not place it in the 2021 budget.
Honorable Minister, I heard you making that statement, and I give you another chance to respond.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. And again, vaccines are important. We have been able to acquire these vaccines, and we are using these vaccines. I heard the member try to imply that because we didn't budget adequate sums of money under this heading, that somehow that becomes mismanagement. That is not mismanagement. By no stretch of the imagination is that mismanagement. And therefore, the member should think what she's saying, because we need to have vaccines. At the time when we were laying the budget, those vaccines were not available to us. The cost was not known to us. And that is why now that we know, and we have gone ahead and acquired these vaccines, we are coming now for this contingency. And I hope that the members would agree that these vaccines are important and in the national interest, and that they will support this contingency funding that we have here.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Mr. Shearer.
Yes, sir. I wish to ask the honourable member a question. Would the honourable member say whether there were shortages in Europe and in other parts of the world with AstraZeneca and other vaccines in the month of February 2021?
Honourable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for that question. Not only was there shortage of AstraZeneca in Europe, but globally there was a shortage. Globally there was a shortage. And not only was there a shortage of AstraZeneca, there was also a shortage of Pfizer, because many countries in Europe could not access Pfizer. Many countries, and up to now, many countries cannot get access to Moderna, because Moderna was produced for the domestic market in the United States. And the Sinopharm vaccines were very limited and were not available. And as I said before, they were still doing clinical trials. And while you now have Sinopharm and Sinovac, again, those vaccines were not widely available. So indeed, there was a shortage. There continues to be a shortage, because as of a couple days ago, the WHO would have said only 2-point-something billion persons would have received their first dose vaccine, which is about 5.6% of the global population. So there is a shortage, because if we had enough vaccines, more people would have gotten vaccinated by now. Unfortunately, that is not the case. And if people don't get vaccinated, we are going to see more cases, we are going to see more hospitalization, we are going to see more deaths. And that is why it is important that we ensure that our population get vaccinated. So again, Thank you very much for that question to illustrate the point of vaccine scarcity globally, and that continues to happen up to today.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Mr. Duncan.
Mr. Speaker, on the same item in the agency, the question is, the Honorable Minister quite recently when it was said that there was a strain, a variant of COVID locally by PAHO and Dr. Carissa Etienne. The Honorable Minister said he wasn't up to date and had asked for a report on that. I want to know, has he received that report, and how in this regime of purchases is he catering for a new strain or a variant? Is there a new strain or a variant in the country, number one, and how in this regime of purchases is he catering for that?
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, can I rise on a point of order? The Standing Order 75-2. 75-2 deals with supplementary financial papers and the way in which the debate is carried on. Moving to variance, etc., has no place on the issue of a supplementary financial paper. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm asking you to invoke 75-2 with regard to the way in which the supplementary financial paper is being dealt with in this House.
I note your observation, the Honorable Minister. Honorable Minister of Health, please. You may proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Variance has nothing to do with this subhead, but I would answer the member nevertheless. And that is, one, when the original strain of the virus from Wuhan started, we have seen over the years that there has been, over the last year or so, that there have been several mutations. Those mutations can lead to strains that are more infectious. Those strains can also cause more severe diseases, and some of them would have the capability of undermining the immune response. You've had strains that would have developed and changed from that original one from Wuhan. And in December of 2020, you had one that was called 614E that then became the dominant strain. And then subsequently we saw mutations that would have led to what was known as the UK variant, or one that was discovered in the UK. We had one that was discovered in South Africa, and one that was discovered in Brazil. Now, to be able to determine what variants you have, one of the things that you have to do is gene sequencing. We don't have the capability in Guyana to do gene sequencing. We had sent 10 samples to CARFA to look at whether or not there are variants. And those 10 samples, when sent there, the results that we got back officially from CARFA to the Ministry of Health did not detect any sample, any variant. We have subsequently learned that there is talk of a P1 variant that was found in Guyana. But we haven't seen any results of that P1 variant. Hence, when I spoke on the matter, I said I don't have any results to show that there's a P1 variant in Guyana. And that's true, that's factual, because we don't have any gene sequence to show that there's a P1 variant. Now, it is not impossible for us to have variants here, because we know that the dominant variant that was in Brazil is P1 and P2 variants. And given the long borders that we have, and despite the measures that we have put in place, there can be possibility that persons would have come over and things like that. We just don't know what are the variants that we have in Guyana. What we can say, however, is that we are seeing cases, an increase in cases, we are seeing hospitalization, and we have seen an increase in deaths. All of these are proxy characteristics that can be attributed to the circulation of variants. And that is nothing novel. If you look at what is happening in neighboring countries, for example, we have seen what is happening in Suriname, we have seen what is happening in Trinidad, where there are increase in cases, increase in severity, increase in hospitalization, increase in deaths. So these things in a region, you will find them. And there's nothing abnormal about strains replacing each other. As the variants become dominant, you will have different strains taking over. And we have seen those evolutions happening in different countries. So it's just a matter of time. Now, having said all of that, the treatment does not change. The measures does not change, the public health measures. Wearing masks does not change. Keeping distance does not change. In fact, what we have to do is to be more vigilant. We have to be more vigilant. And getting the vaccine becomes more important if we are going to defeat these variants. Because the more you're vaccinated, the higher your population is vaccinated, you can prevent variants from mutating in your country. And we have seen that with the examples of countries that have high immunization rates, that you're not seeing these types of evolution of variants. And therefore, the logic is to make sure we get as much of our population as possible vaccinated in the fastest time. And I think if there's one take-home message, I would want that to be the take-home message.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable members, before I call on Mr. Duncan for his supplemental, I want to again draw your attention, as the Honorable Minister did, to 75.2 with respect to the questions on the subhead, and to refer also to the principle which is in questions for answers, that the opinion of the ministers should not be part of your questions. Honorable Member, Mr. Duncan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I was only referring directly to the remarks in the section there that says, why do you want the expenditure?
Honorable Member, I didn't make a comment on what you said.
It says to facilitate payments of vaccines, vaccine supplies, and vaccine rollout activities to mitigate the spread of COVID-19 virus nationally. So one would think a natural part of that is variants and so forth. Hence the question. I didn't hear in the response whether or not the Honorable Minister would have gotten the response he wanted to. He wanted to bring himself up to date with whether or not there's an actual variant that is circulating locally as part of that PAHO's statement, whether or not he has received that vaccine, he has received that, well, the vaccine too, he has received that report. And with that, I want to know that how in the government's thinking in terms of vaccination and the efficacy of the vaccines. Recently, we have learned that, sadly, the Region 10 Vice Chair has passed, and it was widely reported that he would have taken the first dose. Also, there in the public domain, the minister is asking us to go and tell people to be vaccinated, is news that persons have taken the second dose as well and have met their demise. So I'm wanting to know if there's any evolution in the thinking of the government within the regime that you're seeking here in terms of how the virus might be evolving and mutating and not being sufficiently addressed in the regime of vaccines you're offering.
Honorable Minister.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. One, let me say first of all, that the first part of the member's question, I think first of all the member needs to bring himself up to date, the honorable member needs to bring himself up to date with a very technical matter as it relates to variance. It is obvious that the member does not understand variance, and I don't have, I would be willing to have a session in this National Assembly for members of Parliament to talk about variance. I'll be willing to do that. But I don't think this is the session. I don't think this is the session. So that's the first thing. Because I can stand here and talk for the next 2 hours about variance. But I don't think you would want to hear that. But let me go to the second part of the member's question, which I think is very important. And that is, the honorable member said, there are persons who take the vaccine and would have gotten sick, and in one instance that we know of, that person died. When you have your first dose of the vaccine, it doesn't mean that the vaccine automatically starts working. It starts working, but you wouldn't reach the level of immunity after the first second after you got the vaccine. It takes time for your immune system to produce antibodies, and that you have enough antibodies in your body to be able to fight off the virus. In many cases, it takes between 14 to 21 days after the first dose for you to have enough antibodies in your system to fight off any virus. And hence, at that point in time, or sometime a little bit later, that is why you are given a booster shot, the second dose. So people can get sick if they still do not maintain the wearing of masks, if they are not keeping their social distance. We have on umpteen occasion repeated this to get people to understand that after the first dose of the vaccine, that you are not immunized. You have to get both doses of the vaccines. And we have not seen, and just to correct the honorable member, because, you know, we tend to be a little glib in how we pass off certain misinformation. And we just heard a little bit of that just now. I would want to say that it was unintentional. But I just want to make sure that everybody understands that since we have been vaccinating people in Guyana, no one that has received both doses of their vaccine, meaning that they have been fully vaccinated or fully immunized, no one has died. And I just want that to sink in. Secondly, persons who have received their second dose, there is a very small chance that you can get infected. But if you get infected, you probably would be asymptomatic or mildly symptomatic. We have not had, since we have been given out and people have been fully immunized, we have not had a case where any fully immunized person came into the hospital, ended up in the ICU, or died from COVID-19. And I think that is very important for the population to know. So please, let us work together to make sure that we keep our population safe. And the only way we can do that is that we have to make sure that everybody is fully vaccinated. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable members, Mr. Honorable member, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I think that taking the vaccine is important, but the public has legitimate concerns over taking the vaccine. And so we must ask these important questions here. The minister said essentially that his government was on the ball checking around for vaccines as early as 2020, as they became available. Yet availability seems to be the only factor that guided their decision in purchasing the Sputnik V and the Sinopharm. So my question to the minister is, were there any other factors or criteria considered when making a decision to purchase the Sputnik and the Sinopharm vaccine? We know that, well, I heard that you spoke about the efficacy of the Sputnik, but, sir, many countries in Europe are still not using the Sputnik V. Countries like Switzerland has experienced problems with the type of vaccine they use for the older persons as against what they use for the younger folks. So I believe right now they're using the Moderna for the older persons and the Pfizer for the younger generation. So again, I'm asking if availability was the only factor your government considered, or were there other factors like blood clots and all these other things that might be associated with the vaccine?
Thank you, Honorable Member. Mr. Holder, Honorable Member, Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much, Honorable Member, for that question. Obviously, it's not only availability. That would be one of the considerations. But we do have a National Vaccine Committee, and there are technical people on that committee, including a number of experts that understand vaccines and the types of vaccines and a whole host of other things. And that national committee would have gone through all the available vaccines and made recommendations. And based on those recommendations, that is how we issue those emergency use authorization for vaccines that can work in Guyana. So it wasn't an ad hoc process. It was a very well thought out scientific process based on all the evidence that we have about vaccines, including efficacy, safety, side effects, and a whole host of other things. And again, we can go through the advantages and disadvantages of each one of those vaccines. The Honorable Member also spoke about types of vaccines, and he started out by talking about maybe Sputnik V, not currently available in the EU. And that might be true, because Sputnik V has now applied to the European Union, the regulatory body there, and they are now going through a process for approval. But the Honorable Member should also know that a plant to manufacture Sputnik V is being established in Italy, and one to manufacture Sputnik V is being established in Germany. And so in these two European countries, they have gone ahead to set up manufacturing sites for Sputnik V. In terms of the efficacy, if the Honorable Member would look at the articles from the Lancet, you would notice that the efficacy there is quoted at 92.3% or something like that. And the real-life data, however, countries having been using Sputnik now in the field, the real-life data for Sputnik V is closer to 97% efficacy once you have your 2 doses. So in terms of efficacy, it is one of the best vaccines that you have globally. The honorable member also spoke about Switzerland not using vaccines because of clotting. And that can be attributed not to Sputnik V, but you have had issues with AstraZeneca vaccines, which led several countries to suspend or to put a pause on the use of the vaccines until they did proper investigations into these things. What was the issue? For perhaps 1 in every million person, you would find that somebody might have some clotting issue. And when Europe stopped using the vaccine, or at least put a pause to it, it was because they had about 16 cases or so of clotting. They have since investigated those cases, and they have since issued guidance on how to use those vaccines. And that is why, for example, in the UK, they don't recommend in their population for it to be used in a younger age group. Because when they look at the profile, they said it's better for you to use these vaccines in the older age group. So different countries have looked at this and have come up with different answers to what they are going to do in their particular country. We have been using AstraZeneca vaccines here that has been certified by the WHO and was donated through COVAX to us here in Guyana. Since we have started using those vaccines, that was the first set of vaccines that we got. We have not had problems with clotting, and we do have a pharmacovigilance committee that is monitoring for those things. We didn't have any cases of clotting. So just to put that on the table so that everyone is very clear. And we continue to use AstraZeneca, and we haven't had any adverse side effects with AstraZeneca. And I want to differentiate adverse side effects, adverse events from side effects, because side effects is when you get a vaccine and you get some little pain at the site of the vaccine, or you get a little fever or a little nauseous after the vaccine. We have had people with those, but we don't have any adverse events like clotting, and we have been monitoring for that.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable members, I have the opposition chief whip quite a while with his hands up. Honorable Member Mr. Jones. Honorable Member Mr. Jones. While we wait for the Honorable Member Mr. Jones, the Honorable Member Mr. Sherwin Holder, supplemental question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask the Minister, well, over the last few months we've seen a real spike in COVID deaths and persons contracting the COVID virus. So could I ask the Minister what he believes is the reason for that spike? That's one. Two, he mentioned about the task force in his answer to my question just now. So I would like to ask him, what is the composition of that task force, and could the assessment that he spoke of be provided, as that will certainly assist us.
Honorable Member, just let me draw your attention. The Honorable Minister is answering for the Ministry of Health on the purchase of vaccine. So let's stay to that. He had already said that with respect to the task force, the Honorable Prime Minister can receive questions for that somewhere else in some other format.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, my next question is how many Sputnik first dose has been bought and how many second dose has been bought.
Honorable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, in this particular allocation, we are talking about 200,000 doses of vaccines, which would be 100,000 of the component 1 and 100,000 component 2. And, the others would be the Sinopharm.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Let me just try to see if the Honorable Member, Mr. Jones, is accessible. The IT persons, the Honorable Member, Mr. Christopher Jones. Honorable Member, Mr. Holder, you have a supplemental question?
Yes, Mr. Chair. You didn't answer the first question. The minister didn't answer the first question. What is causing the spike in deaths and contraction of the virus?
Honorable Member, Honorable Minister.
Mr. Chairman, disease dynamics, there are a number of things that relate to the disease dynamics, which include the type of virus that is circulating, people's behavior, whether or not people are complying with what they're supposed to be doing. A number of factors. There are literally several factors that we can put together, and we can see how that is contributing to the increase in cases. We can give and provide all the information that you want pertaining to how one must behave. But if people don't modify their behavior, then they are putting themselves at risk for infection. If people are going to go into environments without a mask, then they are putting themselves at risk for infection. And we have seen that type of behavior in our society. And when you have that, and somehow we act as if we are very surprised when the cases are going up. Well, those cases go up because people have not been practicing what they ought to be doing. Wearing masks, keeping distance, and so forth. And taking the vaccine. Right? So if people do these things, then we would see that we start having a drop in the cases. In the United States, for example, we have seen that now a substantial portion of the population has been vaccinated, that you have seen a big drop in the cases, the active cases, a big drop in hospitalization, and a big drop in deaths. If you go to Israel, where a high portion of the population has been immunized, similar things. You would have seen drop in cases, hospitalization, and deaths. Now, we have within our hands the means of doing that. We have the vaccines. We are able to do that. What we need now is to make sure that we get people to take these vaccines. And there are communities that have been resistant, and I'm sure if we can all act, say the same things together, reinforce the same things, then we will see a difference in those communities. But when we have one set of people promoting vaccine, and then you got another set of people trying to disparage the vaccine, or trying to come up with something or some misinformation, then it's not going to work. It is not going to work. We all have to be in this together. Because unless we meet herd immunity, then none of us would be safe. And that is what we have to work towards. This here is a national task, to work towards to get to herd immunity. And once we can get there, then we can relax the measures and so forth. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, Honorable Member, Mr. Holder,
Thank you,
have a
Mr. Chair.
supplemental question?
Yes. The
Honorable
Minister,
Member, we have been exhausting and repeating ourselves on this question. I've been extremely tolerant with some of the questions. I have still, for first question, the opposition chief whip and the opposition member, Ms. Maureen Philadelphia. Go ahead, Mr. Holder.
thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, these questions are legitimate questions. They are questions being asked by the public on a daily basis. Now, the Minister just gave the reason he believes there's a spike. Among other things, the behavior of the society or behavior of the people in society. So my first question is he talking about, when he says the people, I don't think I'm quoting him directly, but is it the behavior of government officials or the behavior of the public, the populace he's speaking of? In a nutshell, what has changed from August 2nd to cause the spike in COVID-related contraction of the disease and deaths? What has changed?
Honorable Minister, before you answer that, if you want to answer that. Honorable Member, we're dealing with the policy with respect to this particular allocation for a vaccine. And what you're asking for is, in my view, something else. So, Honorable Minister, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. If the honorable member lays over his question, I would be happy to answer. And I'll give him a very detailed analysis and report.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Mr. Jones.
Comment, Speaker, my question has passed already, so it's fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member, the Chief Whip, and please, our best wishes for your speedy return. Honorable Member, Ms. Philadelphia.
Thank you very much, Comrade Speaker. My question was asked by Honorable Sharinola, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member, Ms. Philadelphia. Honorable Member, Mr. Mahipal.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, can the Honorable Minister say how many vaccines were thrown away because of expiration?
Again, Honorable Members, this is another question. One would have asked how many vaccines, if was funded from this batch. Honorable Minister, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a simple answer, none.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Mr. Mahipal.
Thank you, sir. Sir, can the Honorable Minister say how many persons who are due for their second dose of Sputnik, and if there is unavailability for them to get it, the Sputnik vaccine?
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As the honorable member should know, that we have publicly stated, we do have, well, you should, because if you were listening to us, you would have learned that. Huh?
Honorable Minister, please.
So,
go ahead with the answer.
Again, the honorable member should know that we have put out a public statement to say that the second dose of Sputnik, we had a delay in supply. However, the second dose of Sputnik you can receive it from 4 weeks to up to 12 weeks. And the latest guidance that we have from the Gamaleya Institute says the longer that you wait, it would increase the durability of your immune response. So within this 4 to 12 weeks period, if you receive the second dose, you would be fine. And we're working to get the second dose supply in, and as soon as we get it, we'll make that announcement so that everyone who got their first dose would be able to come and get their second dose.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Mr. Mahi Paul.
Thank you, sir. Sir, the remarks column of this request, well, the money has already been spent, so this is just for ratification. To facilitate payment of vaccines, vaccine supply, and vaccine rollout activities. Can the Honorable Minister disaggregate this sum so we will know how much money is for the payment of vaccines, how much for the vaccine supplies, and how much for the vaccine rollout activities?
Honorable members, again, I will draw your attention to standing orders with respect to repetition. Honorable Minister.
Yes, let me answer it.
Mr. Chairman, just to repeat, you know, they said repetition is probably the best way to get somebody to learn. So I'll just repeat for the members.
We didn't hear you, Frank.
Yeah. When I answer the leader of the opposition, I said to him that under this heading, we are doing two things. We are paying for Sputnik V, and we're spending $957 million for Sputnik V. And that's 200,000 doses. And we are also paying for Sinopharm vaccines, and we are spending approximately $326 million for Sinopharm vaccines, 100,000 doses. And I answered that several times already.
Thank you, Honorable Member.
Sir,
Honorable Minister, Honorable Member, Mr. Mahi Paul.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I hear the Honorable Minister with his answer pertaining to how much money he's spending for the two vaccines, but there are two other consideration here, which is vaccine supply. I'm assuming that means moving it around, and I see also the vaccine rollout activities, which may also speak to the resources that would have to be used, the buying of ice, and all the other stuff. So I'm asking for the breakdown of the three activities that he spoke to, the Honorable Minister, in this remarks column. And all he did was to answer the one aspect of telling us how much he's spending to buy the vaccines. I want to know the other two activities too, sir. Thank you.
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Chairman, it looked like we are engaged in going around in circles here. Well, you had a long preamble, I'll do one too. So again, the honorable member keeps repeating himself and trying to make a whole set of issues where none exist. If the heading is giving you several things, but I have said to you that we have used the money to buy vaccines, and I've shown you how much money we have spent on the vaccines. It would mean that whatever categories he have conjured up in his head, that they are zero. Because we are paying for the vaccines, and this is the sum. If he would care to add it up, he would see that it would come back to the amount that we have spent. And that's it.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Honorable members, Honorable Member, Mr. Sears.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Two quick ones. With regards to the clinical trials, earlier the Honorable Member mentioned that the Sputnik V vaccine was not approved by the WHO. If so be the case, can the Honorable Minister state in this House if any Guyanese is currently taking part in any clinical trials, and could it be that persons who are taking the Sputnik V vaccine is a part of such trial?
Honorable Minister.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Before vaccines become available, they have to undergo rigid clinical trial. There are 3 phases. None of those phases for Sputnik has been done in Guyana, or for that matter, for any vaccine. Before we actually bought those Sputnik vaccines, they had completed those clinical trials, and the journal that I mentioned, if the honorable member would care to go and read it, you would see that the results of those clinical trials are published in the Lancet. So those trials were not conducted in Guyana.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Mr. Sears.
My final question, Mr. Speaker, towards the honorable member. With regards to, most recently, we would have heard that the United States, through President Joe Biden, might be entertaining the thought of releasing the patents for COVID-19 vaccines that they are producing in the United States of America. Given the fact that Guyana is spending so much money on vaccines, does the government have any intention of, should those patents be released, start developing vaccines of our own?
Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Honorable Member. One, I want to first of all commend the government of the United States for supporting the call to make sure that the patents are released so that vaccines can become available globally. What that would do is that it would ramp up the supply so that globally we can have enough. But those patents would, if they're successful, it would go to countries that already have capacity to be able to develop these vaccines as quickly as possible. I would wish today that we can have capacity in Guyana to have our own pharmaceutical section or industry, and where we can at some point develop vaccines too. We're not there yet. And to put that infrastructure in place would require a lot of money. What we are right now in is a pandemic. There's an urgency for us to get vaccines as quickly as possible and immunize people. What the honorable member is probably talking about is more of a medium to a long-term plan. We are not there yet. So for our immediate purposes of reversing the effects of this pandemic, what we need to do is acquire the vaccines, make sure that we give it to people, and once we do that, I think we'll be able to reach herd immunity and exit this pandemic.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Mr. Mahipal.
Thank you, Comrade Speaker. Comrade Speaker, it pains me to come back to this same part here because I really want to get this over with quickly. But when you add the two figure, you get the 1,283,000,000. But the legend is telling us that it is to facilitate payment of vaccines and also vaccine rollout activities. So there is no, when you add it, there's no sum here that caters for vaccine rollout activities. So can I ask the Honorable Minister, what are the vaccine rollout activities that he speaks to from this line item?
Honorable Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Again, I thought by repeating myself that the honorable member at least would have grasped something. But obviously the honorable member perhaps does not understand how the budget works. If he would look at the provision there, he would see that under that item of 6221, that there was a voted provision, meaning they had money there before. And with those monies, plus the additional, would give you what you're trying to seek to find. So with the money that we have spent, this contingency that we're asking for, we are buying vaccines. For the other things, we have used the voted provision to do that.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, we have really exhausted the questions here, but I really want to thank the members asking and the Honorable Minister for much needed information with respect to vaccine and this program. I now put a question, Honorable Members, that the sum stated for item 1, agency code 47-473, stands part of the estimates. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The sum stated now stands part of the estimates. Honorable members, I now propose a question that item 2, Agency Code 51-512, Ministry of Home Affairs, stands part of the estimates. And I now put the question, honorable members, that the sum stated for item
Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member, Ms. Geeta Chandan Edmond. Honorable member, Ms. Geeta Chandan Edmond.
Thank you, sir. Through you, Mr. Speaker, one of the largest budgets was passed a mere couple of weeks ago. 300 million was allocated for the purchase of land and water transport for the Guyana Police Force. According to the legend, this allocation catered for the purchase of motorcycles. An advance of 5.4 was taken from the contingency fund for the purchase of motorcycles, and this is against the backdrop that this advance was taken between the period April and June, a mere matter of weeks after the budget was passed. May I ask, sir, how many motorcycles were purchased, the type, made, the manufacturer, and the CC of the motorcycles purchased?
Thank you, honorable member. Honorable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'd like to thank the honorable member for our question. The police force, through the ministry, purchased 21 motorcycles to boost the police force anti-crime fighting capabilities. 21 motorcycles were purchased, 12 were 150 cc capacity, were funded from the contingency fund at a cost of $5.4 million. The remaining 9 motorcycles, 8 at 150 cc, costing $3.6 million, and 125 cc motorcycles at a cost of $302,000, for a total of $3.9 million, were funded by the Guyana Police Force capital budget.
Thank you, honorable minister. Honorable member, Ms. Geeta Edmond. Chandan.
Through you again, sir, can the honorable minister state what was the process used to tender for these motorcycles?
Honorable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The sole source method of procurement was used for the purchase of these motorcycles.
Thank you, honorable minister. Honorable member, Ms. Geeta Chandan Edmond.
Thank you once again, sir. The honorable minister has mentioned that the motorcycles mentioned were sourced through sole sourcing. Could the honorable minister, and it's for emphasis, and I'm asking for those of you who are making a lot of noise and aren't allowing me to ask my questions. It is my right for all of us on this side to ask questions. We believe in transparency. And all of you who are making noise over there, it means that you have a lot of things to hide. It is our right on this side to ask questions.
Honorable member, the chair is not denying you any right to ask any question.
Thank you so
please
much, sir.
ask the question and don't lecture me.
Can the honorable minister please therefore state when the National Procurement and Tender Administration Board was approached for approval, and when did Cabinet grant its no objection to this contract?
Honorable minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have that information at the moment, but I will lay it over for purposes of the...
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Edmond. Geeta
Can the
Chandra.
minister commit to a timeline or a deadline for the submission of this information, please?
Honorable Minister, you want to give a commitment on timeline?
I'll give a commitment for Thursday when next we meet.
You're meeting on Thursday, Honorable Minister? Thank you, Honorable Member Ms. Geeta Chandra Edmond.
Thank you again, sir. Can the Honorable Minister state which regions or the divisions that benefited from the purchase of these motorcycles?
Thank you, Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The 4A Georgetown region was the police division region which benefited from the majority of these cycles.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Geeta Chandra Edmond.
Thank you, sir. In the legend, it is stated that the motorcycles were purchased for anti-crime patrol. Can the minister state what studies or statistics were relied on to arrive at placing the motorcycles at the location he just mentioned?
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The studies relate to the occurrences of crime and the type of crimes in the city region area 4A particularly. We might be aware, most of us, that there have been many crimes committed by what are called XR motorcycles. In addition to which, we've had a situation where we had a deficit in the pickups for the police force. We're still awaiting the delivery of those pickups. And so the quickest resort and the most efficacious response to the problem that is ongoing was the purchase of more motorcycles. I would add that the result has been so far a 26% reduction in serious crime overall in the country. Much of it as a result of the institution of these patrols.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Geeta Chandra Edmond.
Thank you, sir. If I'm hearing the minister correct, are you saying, Honorable Minister, that there is a reduction in crime, yet you're purchasing more motorcycles for anti-crime patrol? If you're purchasing more vehicles for anti-crime patrol, this gives the impression that there is an upsurge in crime. So I'm asking, can you make whatever statistics you're relying on available to us and the public?
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Despite a perception that is out there and perhaps being fed by certain persons, there is a reduction in serious crime in Guyana compared year to date as of now. And I will provide those figures when next we meet.
Thank you, Honorable Minister.
To keep it down.
Honorable Member, Ms. Geeta Chandra Edmond.
Honorable Minister, are you saying that when we next meet on Thursday, which I'm now hearing for the first time, that you are going to lay over those statistics which prove that there has been a reduction in serious crimes?
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I will.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Geeta Chandra Edmond.
Through you, sir, to the Honorable Minister, in addition to the purchase of motorcycles, can the Honorable Minister state what are the government plans or strategies to tackle crime? You were saying, sir, when I say you, most Honorable Minister, you're saying that crime has reduced, but given what is in the public domain, we are of the view that there is an upsurge in crime. Can the Honorable Minister state what steps are being taken to prevent the escalation in crime? And could you explain the government's long-term policy to address the rising crime level in our country?
Thank you, Honorable Member. Before you go, Honorable Minister, I want to say to the Honorable Member that this particular question, the government long-term strategy for crime, can't be covering 5.4 million. So that might be best. That might be best for another written question to the Minister. It is my place, yes, Honorable Member. The question has to pertain to this amount here. If you're asking this question a different way, I'd say yes. But Honorable Minister, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The effort, as I suggested previously, was that there was a deficit in pickups and that we are awaiting the acquisition of those pickups. And that in the meantime, the resort was to buy motorcycles which had a quick response to the particular type of crime that we're seeing happening at the moment. So that is what we're doing. In relation to the issues suggested in relation to policy and so on, I'll await the questions of the honorable member or members when they appear.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Geeta Chandan Edmond.
Thank you, sir. I was really looking forward to hear the minister address this question in terms of what are the government policies and strategies and plan to deal with this question. Is it that you plan to buy more vehicles? But I respect your ruling, sir. Can the honorable minister say if by the purchase of these motorcycles, there is an increase in the cost for fuel and lubricants?
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, in a fairly general way, I would say that we can correlate a reduction in the cost and the buying of more fuel and lubricants for the police force. However, we're still examining some issues relating to misuse of fuel and lubricants, amongst other things, in the force.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Geeta Chandan Edmond.
Thank you, sir. Can the honorable minister tell this assembly what was unforeseen, unavoidable, and urgent about this expenditure? And can you also state what arrangements are in place to negate for future shortfalls?
Thank you, Honorable Member. Honorable Minister.
Mr. Chairman, I have to admit that what was unforeseen, at least for us coming into government and coming in at the ministry, that there would have been a serious deficit in the mobile assets of the Guyana Police Force. And we had to respond to it. We had to respond to it by getting more mobile assets in to make up that deficit.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Geeta Chandan Edmond.
Minister, if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying that albeit that 2 budgets were passed by this government, that this is still considered an unforeseen, urgent expense. It's either yes or no, Minister.
Honorable Minister.
Mr. Chairman, I gave an explanation as to coming into the position where there was a serious deficit in mobile and other assets and resources required for the forces. We're responding to this. We have not completely covered all the dynamics related to it. And along with the particular mobile assets, there are questions in relation to some of the factories which had to produce or deliver in a timely fashion some of the mobile assets.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Ms. Geeta Chandan Edmond.
Thank you so much, sir. Minister, you're saying that there is a deficit. This does not qualify as an unforeseen expenditure. You have had the opportunity to prepare for 2 successive budgets. On that note, I wish to draw the Honorable Minister's attention to Article 220 of the Constitution, which outlines the condition that would allow one to spend from the contingencies fund. If you wish, I can lay over Article 220 to you, and I would like to draw the Honorable Minister's attention to Article 218, which outlines the condition.
Honorable member, I want to draw your attention to the question you want to ask.
I am going to ask the question, sir. I'm asking the honorable member, because I've listened to his explanation, whether he is aware by his utterances that he's clearly in breach of the Constitution in relation to these expenditures. And that is why I'm prepared to lay over Article 220 to you, because clearly you have not satisfied
Thank you, honorable member. Honorable Minister, are you aware?
No, Mr. Chairman, I'm not aware that I am in breach of the Constitution.
Thank you, honorable minister. Honorable member, Ms. Geeta Chandan Edmond.
Through you, sir, is the honorable minister accepting that he is in breach of Article 220 of the Constitution?
Honorable minister, are you accepting?
No, Mr. Chairman, I think the honorable member is a lawyer, and she couldn't be attempted by this method to have me accept something.
Thank you, honorable minister. Honorable members, honorable member Ms. Geeta Chandan Edmond.
Honorable Minister, you're maintaining that this is an unforeseen. You haven't satisfied, you haven't laid out your case that this is an unforeseen expenditure.
Honorable member,
I am putting it to you that
honorable
you are
member,
in breach.
honorable, the minister have answered. You can put all you want in more questions to the minister through the other format. At this stage, I want to call on the honorable member, Ms. Ferguson.
Through you. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chair, through you. Earlier, with respect to the procurement method, can the honorable member state the reasons for the sole sourcing? Right, that's one. And two, who is the supplier from which these motorcycles are to be procured?
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The sole source method of procurement was premised based on the fact that the majority of motorcycles used by the Guyana Police Force are Hondas, and that Honda motorcycles are present and supplied here by Marks and Company in Guyana on Charlotte Street, I think. And the motorcycles were readily available. We got them within a few days and we put them out in the streets to fight crime.
Thank you, honorable minister. Honorable member, Mr. Ramjadan. Honorable member, Ms. Ferguson, you had a supplemental. You good? Honorable members, this is a good time to put the question that the sum stated for item number 2, agency 51-512, Ministry of Home Affairs, Guyana Police Force, stands part of the estimates. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The sum stated stands part of the estimates. Honorable members, I now propose a question that the sum stated for item 3, agency 53-531, Guyana Defense Force, Defense and Security Support, stands part of the question. Let us give the honorable minister answering an opportunity. Thank you, honorable minister.
Comrade Speaker.
Honorable Member, Mr. Matty Ford.
Thank you, Comrade Speaker. Comrade Speaker, I rise to just ask if it's possible for us to take the break and return to consider this head.
Honorable members,
time.
we will complete this paper and then we shall take the break. Honorable members, I now put the question. Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, a sum of 618 million to facilitate the advance payment for offshore patrol vessel. But the Honorable Minister indicate how did the purchase of this item become urgent? How did it become unavoidable? And why was it unforeseen in the circumstance?
Thank you, Honorable Leader of the Opposition. Honorable Minister.
It's with pleasure, Mr. Speaker, I answer the question, because the honourable member has had a long association with security, and therefore he may be familiar, I assume, with what is unavoidable, unforeseen, many times in security matters. However, in this case, Guyana, as he would remember, has a territorial issue with our neighbors on a matter in the ICJ. And that we have one vessel, the Essequibo, that has not been doing well and is old. And therefore, to protect our waters, Mr. Speaker, the decision to move to acquire an offshore patrol vessel, a new one, not a second-hand one, but a new one, was thought to be an urgent matter because I'm sure the honourable member is familiar with some incursions that have taken place in our waters. This is not a boat to deal with inland travel. It is a boat to go out to the EEZ. And in case Mr. Duncan knows that, we can take him there. But the issue is that but Mr. Speaker, yes, honourable, yes, we know, honourable. Mr. Speaker, so it is, we have a border issue, we have our waters where there were incursions, we have one old vehicle, one old vessel, and therefore the decision was taken that one could acquire a new one. And this would probably, if my memory is correct, it's the first time Guyana as a nation since independence is buying a brand new patrol vessel. First time. We've always dealt with gifts and second-hand. But this is the first time we're buying a brand new vehicle. And Mr. Harman may be interested to know that it came after a number of consultation with reputable shipbuilders and the final decision with one of the shipbuilders to procure the offshore patrol vessel. And the company is Metal Shark, which I'm sure Mr. Harman is familiar with, Metal Shark boats. So the boat has been acquired in terms of the agreement of the government to purchase it, and that it has been constructed. We have made the first payment, and that we will continue to pay as in the agreement until 2022, when the vehicle will take about a year to construct and to be delivered.
Thank you, Honourable Minister, Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, I'm particularly disturbed at the way in which we are dealing with the security of our state. That we are going to make a decision to purchase a major asset, and it now comes as part of a contingency fund. This has to be carefully planned. This is really ridiculous. Mr. Chairman, the question I want to ask, when was this decision made to purchase this offshore patrol vessel? When was it made?
Thank you, Honorable Leader of the Opposition. Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, please forgive me. I am amused because I remember in the last Parliament questioning Mr. Harman, as he is questioning me, with regards to, well, Mr. Harman, according to standing order, is fine. But Mr. Speaker, that's why we're up here in these desks. This is allowed. Mr. Speaker, can I have your protection, please?
Continue,
because I heard
Honorable,
Gita ask for
continue,
it, and you give it to
Honorable
her.
Minister.
I'd ask for the same respect. Mr. Speaker, I want to remind the honourable member about the last Parliament, and I listened to my friend speak, and I had to smile to myself, because I remember vividly my questioning of the same member with regards to the purchase of a certain number of aircraft that were over $700 million plus $400 million, of which one never worked at all and isn't still working up to now. Secondly, that the other plane that came had to go through huge investments by the cabinet to acquire more parts to fix. So, Mr. Speaker, if I'm going by Mr. Harman's expertise, Mr. Harman's government's expertise in dealing with old equipment, this government has recognized that Essequibo has served Guyana well. The Essequibo vessel has served
on a point of order, please.
well. But, Mr. Speaker, we need to acquire a new vehicle, and I'm still answering the question by
Honorable
Mr.
Minister, Mr. Mahipal has risen on a point of order. Honorable Member, Mr. Mahipal.
Sir, Standing Order 41.5. The Honourable Member keeps referring to me, saying Mr. Harman, Mr. Harman, Mr. Harman. The Standing Order guides us, sir. Thank you.
Honorable, let me just refer back to contents of speeches. 41.5 says a member shall be referred to in the assembly either with the title of comrade before his or her name or official designation, or as the honorable member, Mr/Mrs. So, honorable Minister, please. Thank you,
Mr. Speaker, I corrected myself when you corrected me.
Thank you very much, honorable
And
Minister.
I don't need to be corrected again.
Thank you very much, honorable
Mr. Speaker, the honorable member will, when we do the audit general's reports in the PAC, will, I'm sure, have to help us answer to why Guyana bought such old, dilapidated, second-hand, junk aircraft. But in this case, Mr. President, Mr. Speaker, we have had negotiations with 5 reputable shipbuilders, and maybe Mr. Harman may or may not be familiar with them, such as the OCEA shipbuilders, Damin Shipbuilder, Gravwa Aluminum, which is formerly known as Metal Shark Boats, the Israel Shipyard, the Kotek Mar Shipbuilder, and having gone to all of these to find what we were looking for, the decision was made to procure the vessel offered by the Metal Shark Boats. And I think we as Guyanese should be proud that we will be building the capacity of our Coast Guard, that we are going to be proud to develop the capacity of our Coast Guard. So if there are incursions in our waters, that we will be able to take care of ourselves better. And it's not just about border, it's about piracy, it's about fishing, illegal fishing, and so on. And certainly this House must have concerns about our capacity to take care of protecting our territorial and maritime waters and surroundings. So, Mr. Speaker, this boat there is an agreement There is arrangement of payment of the payment schedule. This is the payment of $618 million that was made in May the 20th, 2021, and that it is unforeseen, but it is urgent, it is required, because the alternative is Guyana would have no vessel in our waters whatsoever, and that would be reprehensible. Don't you think so, as members of the Parliament?
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Member, Mr. Farmer.
Mr. Chairman, I think the Honorable Minister went on what I will call a frolic of her own, because the equipment that was purchased, that we purchased, they were purchased under the budget. They weren't brought as a contingency. So I want to make that first very clear. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, the Minister speaks about the Essequibo, the DFS Essequibo. The Minister would know that that vehicle, that vessel, was acquired under the PPP regime, under your time. And this kept going, but I'm not going to argue about that. What I would like to find out, because you're saying, Madam Minister, that this offshore patrol vessel is going to deal with piracy, is going to deal with the Venezuelan threat, is going to deal with, I don't know, whatever else you're talking about. But an offshore patrol vessel has a specific task and a specific use. What I would like to find out, what is the specific use to which this vessel is going to be put? And again, I ask the question, when was the decision made to acquire this vessel?
Thank you, Honorable
She didn't say it.
Opposition. Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I am sure that you're aware of what are security issues and what usually has not been discussed in this House. These are Defense Board decisions, and the Constitution and our standing orders make provisions for that. Secondly, it's a Defense Board decision to acquire the vessel. Secondly, the purposes of the vessel I cannot disclose for obvious reasons. I never said the one vehicle would do all those things. I said it would be enhancing the capacity of the Coast Guard of our country to be able to protect our waters and to fight against piracy and illegal things. Maybe you should listen more carefully, Honourable Member.
Thank you.
The issue, I'm sure Mr. Harman knows what an offshore patrol vessel is, but the Honourable Member knows all that. However, I am not going to disclose at this forum the use of the vessel. This is part of the Coast Guard, and therefore it has work to do according to the protection and security of our nation. And that's as far as I go. In relation to the point that Mr. Honourable Member responded to do with the planes, I want to remind him it was a supplementary order paper that came to the House, and I can go and bring it to him. Of course, not now, but I can say it was a supplementary order paper. It was not part of a budget of the National Assembly or an annual budget. So, Mr. Speaker, I think as Guyanese, we should be pleased that we are upping and upgrading our capacity as a country and to enhance our ability of our Coast Guard to do what is their mandate, and that we should support this 100%, sir.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable Member, Mr. Harman.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Chairman, the question is when the sum of money here is already been paid. So we would need to know to whom was this money paid, whether in fact there is a larger sum. This is an advance. What we would need to know, what is the full sum to be paid for this vessel, and to whom this $680 million was paid.
Honourable Minister.
Thank you, sir. The money, as I said in the very beginning, that there is a contract and a payment schedule, and that there's 6 payment schedules. This 618 million represents the first payment that was paid in May 2021. That the payment was made to Metal Shark Boats for the first payment, and that is the figure of 618 million Guyana dollars here. It is expected that after the payments are made, we will reach into 2022. So there's a schedule that takes us into 2022, and of course, the last payment is not made until the vessel arrives in Guyana. So there's no payment for the final amount before the vessel arrives in our country. And what was the other question? I think I've answered all your questions. Oh, beg pardon. 11.5 million US dollars.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Yes. Could the Honorable Minister state whether this transaction or the contract for the purchase of this vessel was a government-to-government transaction or whether it was a private company? And if so, what is the competence of that company to build a specific type of vessel that we've asked for? And whether, in fact, this vessel I'm not finished yet. I was just hoping that to get your attention.
Yes.
Whether in fact this
Honorable Leader of the Opposition, you have my attention. That's the
well, at least I need a minister to hear because she answered. Whether this is a vessel that has been purposely built for our circumstances, or whether it is a vehicle that you can actually just go and buy. A special purpose vehicle for Guyana, or whether in fact it was just part of a vehicle that was already manufactured, a vessel that's manufactured.
Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The contract has been signed between the company, Metal Shark Boats, and the Guyana Defense Force. Secondly, the issue of whether the vessel is being purpose-built. Yes, it is being purpose-built for the requirements as designed by the Guyana Defense Force, the Coast Guard.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable Leader of the Opposition.
Minister, you would recognize that I have not asked about the specific capabilities and so on, because I know that really borders on the security line. I wouldn't go there.
Good.
But what I would just like to find out finally is whether there has been any specific training that will come with the purchase of this vessel. Because when you buy a vessel for 11.5 million US, there has to be some element of training, spare parts and so on that will come with it. So I would wish to know whether the contract makes provision for training of our Coast Guard ranks to use this specific vessel, and whether in fact there is what we call interoperability between this vessel and any other vessel that the Coast Guard is using.
Honorable Minister.
It's not a horse or a dog. But Mr. Speaker, the question asked by the Honourable Member is that the vessel has been, the requirements are defined by the Coast Guard and the GDF in regards to their operational needs, and that the training aspect which the Honourable Member raised is that that's not part of the present package to do with the construction and building of the boat, but that would be possibly a follow-up or a separate package to do with training once the vessel is nearer to construction. As I said, it's the only first payment that is being made now, but the present agreement does not include training as part of the construction of the vessel.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. Honorable members, this is a good time to put the question that the sum stated for item number 3, Agency Code 53-531, Guyana Defense Force, Defense and Security Support stands part of the estimates. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The sum now stands part of the estimates. Honorable members, this completes consideration of all items for this financial paper. I will now put the motion, which is that the Committee of Supply approves of the proposals set out in financial paper number 1 of 2021, supplementary estimates, current and capital, totaling $1,906,775,000 for the period 2021 April 1st to 2021 June 8th. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The Assembly will now resume. Honorable Senior Minister in the Office of the President with responsibility for finance.
Mr. Speaker, I wish to report that the Committee of Supply has approved of the proposals set out in financial paper number 1 of 2021, and I now move that the Assembly doth agree with the committee in the said resolution. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. The question is that the Assembly doth agree with the committee in its resolution. Those in favor say aye. Those against say no. The ayes have it. The motion is carried. This completes consideration of financial paper number 1 of 2021. Before I take the suspension, there is a committee of selection meeting, and I would ask the committee members if we can reconvene at 6 o'clock to deal with the business of that meeting. Thank you very much.
Not one caress, not a blade of grass.